All right, kids, it is story time. 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 All right. So we are going to continue reading Christopher ChurchMouse Treasury. And the story that we are going to read today is called A Load of Trouble. So we're going to read and find out, what did Christopher ChurchMouse do this time? All right. Christopher ChurchMouse did a double take as he was passing his cousin Sid's house. Standing in front, right in front of the door, was Sid's little green wagon. Now, that wasn't too unusual because Sid used his wagon all the time to haul food and other things to his little hole in the wall. However, what really caught Chris's attention was what was in the wagon. It was full, right up to the brim, with delicious looking breadcrumbs. Christopher looked both ways to see if anyone was watching, and then reached out and gathered a whole pawful of the crumbs. Stuffing them into his mouth, he exclaimed to himself, "These are great! Wonder where Sid got them." Taking another mouthful, he thought, "I like to have this load for myself." He thought about how nice all the breadcrumbs would be stored in his mother's pantry for the winter. As Cole, Christopher Churchmouse did a double take as he was passing his cousin Sed's house. Standing right in front of the door was Sed's little green wagon. Little green wagon. Now that wasn't too unusual because Sed used his wagon all the time to haul food and other things to his little hole in the wall. However, what really caught Chris's attention was what was in the wagon. It was full, right up to the brim, with delicious looking breadcrumbs. Christopher looked both ways to see if anyone was watching, and then reached out and gathered a whole pawful of the crumbs. Stuffing them into his mouth, he exclaimed to himself, "These are great! Nom, 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 nom. Wonder where Sid got them. Nom, 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 nom." Taking another mouthful, he thought, "I like to have this load for myself." He thought about how nice all the breadcrumbs would be stored in his mother's pantry for the winter. As Chris was thinking and chewing, Papa Church Mouse passed him on his way to work. Uh-oh. Christopher swallowed quickly and brushed the crumbs from his face. Backing away from the wagon, he started whistling a little tune, looking very guilty. Papa said, "Good morning, Chris. What are you doing today?" "Oh, nothing, Papa," said Chris. "Just passing by on my morning walk." "Hmm," said Papa thoughtfully, looking at the wagon full of crumbs. "You weren't thinking of eating some of Sid's crumbs, were you?" Doesn't Chris look guilty? "How can he always know what I'm thinking?" thought Christopher. But aloud he said, "Oh no, Papa. At least I'm not thinking of eating them now." Mm, mm, mm. He continued softly to himself. But deep inside his heart, he knew that wasn't true. He was thinking of getting the crumbs for himself. And as usual, his wise papa knew it. Well, be sure you aren't deceiving yourself, said Papa. What does that mean? Asked Christopher. Deceive means to fool somebody, to cause somebody to believe in untruth, said Papa. In a way, it's just like lying. Why, Papa, exclaimed Christopher, you know I wouldn't lie. Ooh, Christopher just told a lie. Again, I hope not, but you might deceive or fool yourself. Remember, Pastor Shepherd told the people a few weeks ago, the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Yes, Papa, I remember, said Christopher. I'll be careful not to deceive. See that you don't, Chris. Have a good day, said Papa, giving him a pat on his head and hurrying off with his lunch bucket. After Papa left, Christopher looked hungrily at the wagon load of crumbs. Suppose, he thought, that I replace its crumbs, say, with sawdust. Yeah, that's a good idea. After all, that wouldn't be stealing, for I would be giving him something he needs. He probably has enough crumbs, and I don't have any. I have plenty of sawdust from when we made our pantry bigger. A mouse can always use sawdust. That's what I'll do. He'll never care. In fact, he'll be glad to have sawdust when he doesn't have any of his home. When he'll be glad to have sawdust when he doesn't have any of his own. You see, Christopher, he's trying to think of some good ideas to steal. And with that, Christopher started to pull the wagon full of crumbs towards his own house. As he did, he remembered for a minute what Papa had said about deceit. Papa had said deceit was causing someone to believe in untruth, and that was what he was doing. But Chris quickly put that thought out of his mind. He didn't want to think about it because he knew he was wrong. He just concentrated on getting the wagon home without being seen. Working quickly when he got there, he stored the breadcrumbs in some little boxes Mama had in the pantry. Then he filled the wagon with the sawdust and returned it to Ced's house. He left the wagon just where he had found it. No one saw him. Great, thought Chris, dusting himself off. No one saw me. I'm sure Ced will never notice, and if he does, he'll think he made the mistake himself. Very pleased, Christopher went home to have his tea. He was very proud to think how smart he'd been. Just as Mama was pouring the tea, there was a knock at the door. Who can that be? Wondered Mama. Chris, answer the door. I have to get back to the kitchen. Opening the door, Christopher saw, to his surprise, his cousin Ced with the wagon full of sawdust. Chris's heart started to beat faster. What on earth? Does he know? How did he find out? Christopher thought in astonishment. See here? Christopher's taking the wagon back with all the sawdust. Not food, but sawdust to trick his cousin. And there he is. Chris is scared again because he did something wrong. Come in, Ced. He stammered out loud. Thank you, Christopher, replied Ced. I brought you a present. You have? Stuttered Christopher. Yes, I've brought you a whole wagon load of breadcrumbs. I hauled them up from the kitchen last night. I got another load today and thought I'd share it with you. Oh, how nice, but are you sure you want to? Floundered Christopher, feeling worse every minute. Sure, you're my favorite cousin, aren't you? What's a family for, if not to help one another? Said Squeak happily. Well, that's kind of you, Said. I'll unload them right in the pantry and... Oh, I see you're just having tea. That's great. and I can watch you enjoy them, said, said explained. With that, said put a big scoop of the sawdust on Christopher's plate. Yes, great, said Christopher miserably, and he sat down before the plate of sawdust. Would you like some? He asked weakly. Oh, no, thank you. I ate plenty while I was loading the wagon. They're delicious. Putting some in his mouth, Chris began to choke it down. How do you like them? asked Ed. Delicious, choked Christopher as he took a gulp of tea to wash the sawdust down. Oh my goodness. Christopher had never felt more miserable in his life. Papa had been so right. The heart is deceitful, and Christopher had deceived not only said, but also himself in thinking such a trick was all right. How terrible Chris felt to know he had deceived Said in such a mean way, and Said had been so kind to him too. Sputtered Christopher. Why, Chris, what's the matter? Asked Said, jumping up to pound his choky cousin on the back. Don't you like the breadcrumbs? By now, tears were streaming down the face of the guilty little mouse. No, no, I don't, he squeaked unhappily. You don't? Said questioned in wonder. Why? I thought you'd like them. I thought. Stop, said Christopher, putting up his hand to still. Excuse me. Stop, said Christopher, putting up his hand to still Said's questions. Oh, I have been so naughty, but I'm very, very sorry, cried Christopher, fishing out his handkerchief from his back pocket and blowing his nose loudly. Why, Chris, whatever is wrong? asked Sid. He came over to Chris and patted him on the shoulder. Deceit is wrong, said Christopher. What's deceit? asked Sid curiously. Deceit is causing someone to believe in untruth, said the unhappy little mouse. Wiping his eyes, it's the same thing as lying. I see, said replied. But what does that have to do with my breadcrumbs? Oops, sorry. They aren't breadcrumbs, squeaked Christopher. What do you mean not breadcrumbs? They are too. They're nice breadcrumbs from the kitchen. I had some myself, and I know. No, they're not, interrupted Christopher. I mean, they were, but they're not now. What are you talking about, Christopher? Begin, exclaimed said, beginning to get angry. These most certainly are breadcrumbs, he said emphatically, stepping over to the table and taking a pawful. They most certainly are. Why, they're very good breadcrumbs, he insisted, stuffing his paw full into his mouth. The moment Sid put the sawdust in his mouth, he began to choke and cough. Christopher rushed to hand him a cup of cool tea to drink. Here, Chris said, handing it to him. I tried to tell you they're not crumbs. They're sawdust. Sawdust! shrieked Sid, uh, taking a big gulp and coughing. Yes, sawdust, said Christopher weakly. I was trying to tell you that I exchanged your breadcrumbs for some sawdust. I deceived you. I deceived you, said. I wanted you to think they were still breadcrumbs. I took your breadcrumbs and I stored them in our pantry and I replaced the crumbs with some sawdust. It almost worked too. I almost deceived you, and it was very wrong. What's wrong? Asked Mamma, coming into the room suddenly. Oh no, mumbled Christopher. Now I'm really in for it. Deceit is wrong, he said for the second time. Then he explained to Mama how he had fooled Sid by exchanging the crumbs for sawdust. He also explained what Papa had said about deceit. When Christopher had finished talking, Mama came over and put her arm around his shoulders. Well, son, I certainly think you have learned a lesson today. Christopher nodded his head. He was glad his mama was so understanding, but he knew he must still ask Sid's forgiveness. You see, Sid, I deceived you because I caused you to believe in an untruth. Will you forgive me? Asked Christopher. Of course I will, squeaked Sid, giving him a hug. Christopher was so happy to be forgiven that he felt another tear slip down his cheek. Wiping his eyes, he looked at his mama. And I forgive you too, said Mama, taking him in her arms and giving him a big hug. Christopher had learned a very important lesson that day. God said and says in his word, bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. Proverbs 20:17. Well, in this case, sawdust, Christopher thought to himself. So that is the end of that story. So here are some questions that you can answer. What did Christopher find in front of his cousin's door? What did Papa Church Mouse say deceive means? How is deceiving someone just like lying? And what did Christopher do with a load of breadcrumbs? Do you think Sid was a good cousin to Christopher? Why do you think he was? Did Christopher make things right with Sid? How? I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll be back with more. Story time, story time, story time, story time, story time. Yeah, story time.